We'll start with
Failure.
a failure.
We're starting with a failure because it's better to start with failure than end with it as an artist. So a lot of times you get asked to do things, you present ideas, and they don't work out, and you have to be prepared for it, and I think it's fine. This was one such idea, which actually did end in something at least. It was to have for the fourth plinth in Trafalgar Square, you might know the project, and I was shortlisted for this idea, which was to have a car that had been destroyed in Iraq, during the war in Iraq, on the plinth for the public to see. It would have been there for 6 months. And I felt, because Trafalgar Square as a space has a lot of imperial connections, it's a very public space, I felt that was the right place and the right thing to put on the plinth. And also because it was exactly the right size, because what should have been on there was a man on a horse, but they couldn't raise enough money in the 18th century to put in there. So it was empty. And a man on a horse is more or less the same size as a car. So it didn't happen.
Do you just real quickly, so you proposed this.
Yeah.
When you proposed this, did you think it might happen? Or were you like, maybe they'll go for this? And did you get any inside scoop, because you are a connected man in that city? Did you get any background knowledge? Did people say you got very close, or like you didn't have a chance?
Well, I kind of, in a way, I hoped it wasn't going to happen, because I could see all the problems that might happen, entail if it did get chosen. But I did hear that in the selection process, it was a very, very heated discussion.
Oh, really?
People shouting at each other about why they should or should not have it there. But I don't know who those people were. I know who was on the board, on the committee, but I don't know who was shouting at who about what. Which is fair enough. I think when you go into these things as an artist or an architect, you have to be prepared to take these decisions and not get too annoyed by them.
Sure. And just to say, too, at that particular time, the Iraq War was, clearly in the arts, everyone knows it was a bad idea, but it was certainly a debated idea in terms of broad politics in Britain.
Very much so, and I think personally I'd just been obsessed with it for those years. I'd read everything I could, read every book. I felt I'd seen every film and so on, but one reason why I wanted to do this, and what we ended up doing, was I could actually be around people who'd been there, who'd either served there or been in Iraq, Iraqi citizens and so on. So this was a way of, it's a piece of research.
Okay.
I'm going to go back, there we go. So what happened was that it didn't happen, like I said, but it was an idea I wanted to keep hold of. And then I had an opportunity to do something with a new museum, and I thought I'd do a museum about the war in Iraq, which I didn't really do, but I did get a car through an activist, actually, who'd used two cars in exhibitions. And then, even more excitingly, for me personally, we took the car with Creative Time on the road throughout America with an American soldier and an Iraqi citizen who'd been a translator for the American army. So I did what I wanted to do, basically.
And so we went on, just to say, we went on this road trip. This is actually, just to say, this was in
29 Palms Marine Base, near the Marine Base.
Right, and we actually wanted to get near the Marine Base to actually just hold a conference. We would drive around, and there were sites that we'd actually pre-set up, but it was a bit of a road trip. So in this particular one, we were trying to find a place to just have conversations with soldiers, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
And we found this incredible mural, which is...
it's the Fall of Baghdad. It's a town of murals, actually, 29 Palms, it's known for that. But we stopped at about 15 places. I'll read out what that says on the side if you can't read it. It says, this car was destroyed by a bomb in a Baghdad marketplace, March the 5th, 2007. But really, we just stopped at places, quite a lot of the time unannounced, and just saw what happened, really, and sort of opened ourselves up to the elements, as it were. And I was interested in doing that, just because I'm still not really sure about in the US what public space actually is, about the ownership and how it's used. And I wanted to see what would happen if you intervened, really, with this rather unpleasant object, and what reactions you'd get.
Just to say, too, one of the things that we experienced pretty quickly is that it's unclear what this project is. We certainly didn't announce it as an art project. And, it's just to have this out there with some guys kind of hovering around it. wasn't exactly clear what you were supposed to do with that situation. And I think you were kind of like, we need some flyers.
Yeah.
We need to kind of start telling people what was happening. Do you want to just talk about the kind of thinking through the reception of it too?
Well, I mean, I think we were very worried. That's Isam, the Iraqi citizen sitting on the truck, on the back of the truck there. I think we were all very worried about the reaction of the public, of the US public, especially because we went to potentially quite right-wing areas, or actually, for reality, right-wing areas, and we thought we might get attacked by people, which did not happen at all. Weirdly, the people that were most annoyed with us were anti-war protesters, or people who'd been anti-war, because we weren't anti-war. It wasn't an anti-war art piece in their eyes, and it wasn't really. It was about it.
That's kind of been my story since this project.
Yeah. So, but we realized that you actually did what you needed to do was make something to explain to people what was going on. You couldn't have that conversation 5,000 times. You had to give them something they could read by themselves and then make a decision to come and talk to you. But it was a totally random process. So I felt we were very much at the elements. We were open to the elements, basically, which includes human beings as well as the weather.
And then I think it might be nice to just hear from Ron. Is he the next slide? Is that right?
Yeah. So we're just going to play a bit of film. We made some short films. This is one of my favorite ones, if that's the right word. Just of the conversations we were having with people and how they took strange turns.
I can hear this.
Anytime the country goes through hard times, the Great Depression, World War II, or anything else, it's the culture that brings people together.
Yeah.
It's all about history. Stax Music, Isaac Hayes, Otis Redding, Booker T and the MGs, Sun Records, all of it. It all started here. All of it started here. Memphis gets a bad rap, but people in Memphis work harder to get along because of the adversity that they've been through. And that if people in other places could see how hard people in Memphis work to get along and to right the wrongs of the past, it wouldn't have such a bad reputation. I love Memphis. Memphis is a great place. And when I moved down here last year, I decided that's the last time I'm moving. I'm never going back to Nashville. I'm staying right here in Memphis. And, this is it, because I'm old now. I'm getting close to retirement.
Did you feel isolated when you were, because of your political views early on?
God, yes. My daughter that I told y'all about, that chewed the cop out, at the time that happened, she was ill. And a few months later, she died.
I'm sorry.
And the same lady that called the cops on her, I was standing outside the day before the funeral, and we were planning some funeral arrangements. And this lady had the nerve to walk up to me and tell me that the reason that my daughter died was that God was punishing us for not supporting George W. Bush. And I mean, that did something to me. I mean, it just kind of turned me against any type of religion. And, as far as this be bipartisan and forgive and forget, no. You can't forgive and forget. Like that car over there that got blown all to pieces. The people that live over there, how many of their loved ones died in that blast? Should they forgive and forget? They didn't come over here and start a war on us. We came over there and started a war on them. Why shouldn't they hate us forever? If someone did that to my neighborhood, I guarantee I'd hate them forever. But Americans have a sense of entitlement, that everything's owed to us. Why? Why should we have everything?
Nice.
Ron, that was pretty amazing.
Yeah. So it was about a month.
Yeah.
And then the car is now in the Imperial War Museum. So strangely, it's in a museum environment. When it was in the gallery at the new museum, I wasn't particularly happy because as soon as you put something into a museum or gallery like that, like the new museum, everyone assumes it's an artwork, and that makes things kind of complicated because they think it's very beautiful because it's gone red and it's rusted and all the shapes and so on. And it's all about John Chamberlain and it's about this and that. Actually, it's not that at all. So to get it out on the road took it back to where it should have been.
Just something I wanted to say too, because it's something that I learned very powerfully as we kind of traveled, was that because there was no overt political language, it was a very confusing project for everyone. I mean, it wasn't an anti-war project for the left-wing activists, and God bless. We had this amazing Iraqi policy guy that said something to the effect of, remember we were in DC and he said something to the effect of, this is like you guys are coming around New Orleans post-Katrina and you want to have a conversation of the delicacies of Cajun food. It's not exactly the time or place to have a nuanced discussion about Iraq. People are dying there. And I got his point. But what was fascinating was, without an overt anti-war message, conversations opened up in really profound ways. And in particular, the people that were the most complex and also desperate to talk were those most immediately affected by the war, whether they were Iraqi or predominantly soldiers' families and soldiers themselves.
Yeah, and I think that I didn't want to close down the discussions, so I didn't want to laden it with all this other meaning and with opinion, basically. And I thought that was very important for us. I mean, for me, that's where the art lay, as opposed to the activism. It wasn't really an activist work, because it wasn't telling you something, really, in those explicit ways that activist work sometimes do. Well, that's probably a very controversial thing to say here, but I felt it was I wanted to be much more open and unusual in that respect project.
You know, but it taught me a lot, just to say in terms of a kind of form of activism, because without this project, I wouldn't have talked to that woman we met in Arizona who worked for Kellogg, Brown and Root.
Yeah.
Just to say, there's a lot of people who were touched by the war that in my activist anti-war times would not have spoke to me at all, or opened up in these ways that gave a lot more complexity to the infrastructures that were at war, the people I was touching lives.
She's in one of the pictures. We can just go back. She's the lady there in the white. Worked R&R, really. She would get entertainers and baseball players and basketball players to come and meet the troops and sign things and so on. And then she started talking about prostitution on the bases with the Filipino women who were doing all the washing and the catering and so on. And that's when the soldier we were on the road with just went. It's the only time he really lost it, because he totally denied that there was any sort of prostitution going on, which, if you think about it, is almost inevitable it would be. Yeah, I mean, for me, this is the sort of a highlight of my career, I think. But before that, I'm probably known more for this, which is a reconstruction of a battle from the miners' strike from 1984. And what I was very keen to do was, because at the time, and because a lot of art is all about people, well, it is in Britain at least, money is put into art to sort of bring people together and to heal wounds and make people feel better about their lives. I wanted to do something that actually did the opposite, if anything. If anything, it sort of dug up a dead body and had a look at it and poked around in it. And this is what this was. This was a reconstruction of a battle from the miners' strike with about 1,000 people, some of whom had been in the strike and were playing themselves. Others were parts of reenactment groups. And they reenacted a battle, a political battle that was within living memory on British soil. In another way, it was like if a particularly bad crime has been committed in Britain and the police have no idea what happened, they will reconstruct the crime scene. They reconstruct the crime as it was, someone disappearing or a child being murdered or something. And I saw this as a massive reconstruction of a crime, basically. And
it was also really, for me, interesting. I mean, I have to tell you, it's so funny because this project changed my entire idea of what public art could be. I love the idea of reenacting a moment of history from 1984?
84, yeah.
So not actually far away history.
No.
And recent enough where you were able to bring the miners that participated in it back into the reenactment of it.
Yeah. That was a very important part. There's another image of it. As was the use of people like this, who are reenactors. And that reenactment is a huge thing in Britain. We're obsessed with our history in Britain. If you go to Britain and turn on the TV, you'd still think the Second World War was happening, because every night there's a documentary about Hitler's this, Hitler's that. And now the First World War has started all up again, and everyone feels very, very upset about the First World War.
Can we please at some point talk about your hatred of Downton Abbey? Please, I was
just getting onto it.
Oh, were you?
No, you put me off my stride. Well, that's something, yeah, for me, that's sort of the class system personified and made to look like a pleasant thing. Someone was saying that actually what you'd find on the real Downton Abbey, someone should make that as a film, the real Downton Abbey, is the staff would never talk to the people.
It'd just be two separate shows.
Yeah, but you wouldn't even look them in the eye, exactly. You could do split screen, basically, like Woodstock or something, and you'd have what was really happening, because there's very, very little communication. Sometimes you couldn't look them in the eye or even face the people. So it's almost like working with Madonna or Cher or someone. You're not allowed to look these people in the eye, because they have the power, basically. So going back a touch, this is an expression of our obsession in Britain with history and with dressing up, and also with civil wars, and it's a reenactment. And I was interested in getting people who reenact every weekend, which is in itself a piece of public performance. They reenact battles from history, actually meeting veterans of a campaign that was on the soil that they lived on, of a war, effectively, a social and cultural war, and meeting them and performing with them, effectively. And because these reenactments are incredibly apolitical when you see them, and I wanted them to be part of a very politicized, biased, if I can put it like that, reenactment. So that was very important.
But, it's interesting, too, just thinking about Orgreave. And I know, some artists, it's the gift that's a curse to make such a great work in your life, because...
It's my stairway to heaven.
Yeah. Can you play Battle of Orgreave one more time, Jeremy?
I will play it again.
Yeah.
I will play that riff.
Yeah.
So
but it's just such a great work.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. But I was also thinking there's a lot of strands in this that tease out in your future work, too. Your interest in folk culture. You're interested in politics and class.
Yeah. I'm interested, I just put this image up.
Yeah.
You can just about see it. It's not so high quality. I'm very interested in folk performance and folk culture in Britain, anywhere, basically. And this is, these are great, huge public events that have been going on for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and there are a lot of them to do with territory. So this, for example, is called the Haxey Hood, and it's hundreds of men, mainly men, fighting over a leather baton, which they're trying to get from either one end of a field to another end of a field. And if it goes to one village and gets sort of pushed around the village by hundreds of men, then one village wins, and then another, likewise with the village over the hill. And this has been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years. Everyone has a kind of understanding that it's very, very dangerous, but you still take part in it, and it's the biggest thing to happen. And because of the internet, these things are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. They're becoming huge events. But this is like the beginning, for me, the beginning of sort of sport meets performance art. I've gone to a number of them. And
You've attended these? You've not. There's no way on earth I would see a picture of you in that mix.
I wouldn't be in it.
No.
I'd be a little bit further away from that, but I've been to them.
Yeah.
Weirdly, I have a fear of confrontation and a fear of crowds, which is basically everything that I do is sort of crowds and confrontation. Here's another one. This is amazing. This is called Ottery St. Mary. A lot of alcohol is involved. I mean, to me, it's a bit like contemporary art. People do this, they take it very seriously, but they actually have no idea why they're doing it at the end of the day and what it is. I hope that's okay to say that. So this is a whole afternoon and evening, and you start with flaming barrels of tar, and you start putting them on the backs of children, and I mean absolute 4 or 5-year-old kids, and they race up and down the street. And by the end of the evening, they have a barrel that's the size of a small car, a European car, and it's held aloft and paraded around, and everyone is going berserk by this moment. And there's an amazing sign, an official sign by the council. I saw it on a video recently, and it just says, "You are here at your own risk," which I think is a great sort of expression, really, because it is true, and it's just...
You should say that when you come into the United States.
Yeah, exactly. Or here. I mean, it's one of those
Sweden.
things. Yeah.
You are here at your own risk.
And that's it. And they look away after that. The police, the fire brigade, they just don't want to know what's happened. So it's a place of sort of anarchy and enjoyment and violence and full of meaning, but absolutely no one really knows what that meaning is. But it's a very important event in their lives.
We've been talking about this a lot, but certainly often public art's defined by outside of museums or galleries. But I kind of want to just think through public art as a way of expression, because certainly what's always struck me about your work is your interest in not only folkloric traditions, but the cultural expressions that are not laden in Artland, that this is performance.
It's absolutely performance. I mean, that's the Berry Man. That's a man who walks through a village, visiting pubs. A lot of pubs involved in a lot of these things as places, and he visits every pub, and it takes him a whole day. He drinks and he wets himself because he can't obviously get out of this suit, which is very prickly. And again, I'm not entirely sure of the meaning of this event, but someone probably is or has versions of it. But that happens once. That happens once a year.
When in your life did you start turning towards this kind of folk interest?
I think it comes from childhood, being raised in an environment where my parents used to go into the countryside occasionally and go to sort of fairs and things like that. And they were church people, so there's always something happening, if that's the right way of putting it. And there's a sense of performance. And so that's the next slide. This is very, very good. The next slide this is something you may know, something I did, toured Britain. It's an inflatable version of Stonehenge that toured Britain during the Olympics, and then toured London, and has since been around the world. And for me, that again is another childhood interest in ancient Britain and ancient history, and how funny it is. I mean, a lot of things we've done.
This is just to say,
yeah.
This one is, I hope this isn't offensive, but it's like so stupid, it's funny.
I was about to say that.
Were you?
I wanted to make the most stupid artwork ever made, basically. Something that even Banksy might make.
Yeah.
That bad. So I thought I'd get there before he would.
Yeah.
And but I mean, if you think about my other work, the thing we did together was very irresponsible. It was very stupid. Could have been a disaster very quickly. It was absurd, as was the Orgreave. That could have become a disaster. If it had gone wrong, it could have been a comedy thing almost. So I was interested in making things that have an amount of risk to them. The risk was built in. It was called sacrilege. So I built in the criticism into the name. So no one could accuse me of sacrilege, because it was sacrilege, literally. That's how I felt.
You managed to do something. I mean, both, I think, actually, this reminds me a lot of the fourth plinth proposal.
Yeah.
Because, like, when the Olympics, my God, the Olympics.
Yeah.
When that comes marching on into town.
Yeah.
And it starts, it's like nationalism on steroids.
Absolutely.
So you brought out Stonehenge.
Well, I thought, for a few reasons. Firstly, sport has no sense of humor, more or less, does it? And the Olympics absolutely has no sense of humor. And then also, I thought that Britain is known for its sense of humor. And I wanted to do something about British identity, whereas, everyone thinks of Stonehenge as this great symbol of British identity. But of course, no one has a faintest idea of what happened there. And so they project their own version of Britain onto it, which can be anything, basically. And so I liked that. I liked the comedic value of Stonehenge. And so I wanted that. I wanted something that was funny, it was interactive, it was stupid, but it was irresistible in a way about Britain. And also I wanted a sort of spiritual element. So these photographs, I learned something very quickly, is if you don't want to be photographed jumping on this for press purposes, i.e. myself don't want to be photographed, you get young people to do acrobatics, and that is much, much better, and you don't have to sort of be photographed by the press. So I got a lot of photographs of these youngsters basically doing these, jumping around and doing twists and so on, and somersaults. And I wanted to get pictures of them floating, basically like they're levitating. So there is a sort of serious side. I don't know if it's a kind of cosmic side to it. So these children just like rising up. So that was something I was concerned about.
I didn't realize I think we're almost out of time here.
Okay, I'll do one more picture.
Yeah.
This is we are out of time. This is the city, performing the city.
Yeah.
A procession through Manchester.
Just to say, this was a parade through Manchester, and this gained a lot of controversy. Why?
Because of this, we had people smoking, walking through the streets, and they nearly closed the parade down. The council nearly closed it down.
Yeah, it was like proud smokers through Manchester.
Yeah, the
and
unrepentant smokers.
All right. Anyways, thanks so much to Jeremy Duller.
Cheers.